Hello, welcome to this regular meeting of the Planning Commission this Tuesday evening, May 13th. I now call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Heleva, would you please call the roll?
Chair Patel,
Here.
Vice Chair Nugent,
Present.
Commissioner Ebnetter, Commissioner Clafter,
Present.
Commissioner Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. We're excited to be here in person with options for virtual participation. For those attending in person, complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the clerk. If participating remotely, use the raise hand feature in Zoom and you'll be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. And finally, we welcome speakers providing public comment, but please be advised this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item. If speakers fail to follow these rules, they will be warned, and if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended. The first item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Heleva, would you please read the consent calendar?
Item 1, Planning Commission meeting minutes approval. Approve the minutes of the regular meetings of 2/11/2025 and 2/25/2025.
Is there any member of the commission who would like to pull any item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, are there any members of the public who wish to comment on any consent calendar item? Now would be the time to make your comment. This is for the consent calendar only.
Through the chair, we have no public comments.
Great, thank you so much. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'd like to second that.
Great.
And for the vote, Chair Patel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Ebnetter,
Yes.
Commissioner Clafter,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Great. Next on our agenda is public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the Planning Commission at this time. State law prevents the commission from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. Public comment is generally limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, that is subject to the commission's discretion and can be extended if the commission wishes to do so. We'll now open the public comment period. If there are any members of the public attending in person, please turn in your speaker slip now, and any remote attendees wishing to comment, please raise your hand now.
Through the chair, we have 2 in-person commenters and none on Zoom.
Okay, great. Since we have 2 commenters, each commenter is allowed 3 minutes of time.
Noelia, if you could come to the podium first, please. The timer is set for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I hope this is a surprise that I'm here. Just want to, I came here this evening to thank Commissioner Ebnetter and Commissioner Nugent for their many years of service in person. And I want to talk a little bit about how proud it's made me to know that you two have been on this commission, reflecting what I think is the best of our city. and doing hard work to make fair decisions and do what is best for our community in terms of housing. And I think back to when I met each of you many years ago, and Commissioner Ebneter, I think it may have been close to 10 years now, actually. And I think you've seen me grow as a leader in this community, in our city, in our county, and your steadfast support and dedication to your values has always been something that has brought me a lot of joy. And I've got to go to your summer parties, which are really fun. And I'm just really proud of the work that you've done here and of your advocacy in our community for San Mateo that welcomes and houses everyone, for a San Mateo that really values everyone here and does so not just in words, but in actions and in policy decisions. And I don't think that's common enough all the time. And Commissioner Nugent, I think we've known each other a little, probably around half of that time. And I remember when I met you, a mutual friend of ours introduced us to each other, and it really came off to me as you. The thing that stood out to me about you was your humility, and also how beautiful your home was, and how good of a neighbor you were, and how much you respected the neighborhood that you moved into, and really wanted to keep that neighborhood's characteristic and also be super welcoming as well. And it's been an honor to know you and your family, your amazing wife, your beautiful child, your dog child as well. So thank you so much. And I have some commendations for each of you on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. And I just want to thank you each for your many, many years of service. And it's an honor to know you and be friends with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor, for your comment.
Carol, you can please come to the podium.
I didn't realize it, but I am here this evening to echo Noelia Corso. My name is Carol Eldridge, and I've come because I have too wanted to thank John Ebneter and Adam Nugent for their service on this commission. Would it be possible to find two people who took their roles more seriously, who worked more assiduously to ensure the sustainability of our community, and who in the process upheld the interests of all of those living in the city? Would it be possible? I think it would not be. So it's only been in the last few years that I've come to understand the extent to which land use created the pronounced inequality in this country. It has been a sobering education for me. But just as land use helped dig us into a hole, it can also be an instrument for digging us out of a hole. These two commissioners both recognized this. And they both worked in the context of planning to ensure that we would have in this community and in this country as widely distributed opportunity as we possibly could have. Something betrayed by our history, but also something that is important to so many of us. So for that, I thank you both.
Thank you, Carol, for your comment.
Chair Patel, we have one public commenter via Zoom.
Great.
Jonathan, if you could speak, the timer is set for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Commissioners Ebneter and Nugent. I'm Jonathan Stone with Prometheus Real Estate Group. On behalf of our organization, I want to thank you for your time and service to this wonderful city. Your leadership and guidance throughout the years has been great to see and be a part of, and the city is better for it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Through the chair, we have no more public comments.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period. I will mention that for our public commenters in person, if you're planning to stick around to the end of the meeting, there will be a small celebration afterwards, and you are welcome to join us. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the housing element implementation, zoning code amendments, and below market rate inclusionary program update. We will start with a staff presentation and move to public comments. Members of the public are given 2 to 3 minutes to speak, depending on the number of speakers. Once the public hearing is closed, the chair may ask staff to respond to any public comments, and the commission will ask clarifying questions, deliberate, and render a recommendation to the city council.
Okay, just getting the technology to work. I'm Steve Golden, principal planner in the planning division, and tag teaming on this one is Rachel Horst, the housing and neighborhood services manager, and she's attending virtually with us. So I'll begin the presentation, and then Rachel will also be presenting to us as well. Okay, so just want to give you and the folks here a little background to begin with. So after a multi-year process, the city of San Mateo adopted our housing element. City Council adopted on May 20th, 2024, and it was certified by the California Housing and Community Development Department on July 23rd, 2024. As you know, there's 5 goals to support the compliance with state law and to achieve the city's regional housing needs. It's supporting production, preservation, protection, promotion, and affirmatively further fair housing. It includes 53 policies and 150 implementation action items, and we're going to discuss 3 of those implementation action items tonight. There's numerous housing element policies and programs that require zoning code amendments. We adopted some in 2024. We've been doing some this year in 2025, and there'll be some forthcoming hopefully in 2026. So to dive in those a little bit more, we adopted 2 ordinances in November 2023. The first increased the threshold for housing projects up to 25 units. As you know, we increased that again last month. And then the second adoption in November 2023 was the objective design standards for multifamily residential projects and mixed-use projects with residential components. And then in July 2024, as part of the housing element adoption, the city established a by right designation for housing sites that we reused in prior housing elements, and those had to meet certain affordability and density requirements. Last month, the council adopted 2 ordinances to implement a variety of housing element action and program items, and pursuant to and consistent with state law. And in that ordinance, the council increased the zoning administrator threshold for residential projects to 99 units. There was just giving you some additional information of when your recommendation went to council. They did look at that threshold, and they thought that 99 units was an appropriate threshold for zoning administrator approval. And they did also adopt code sections for the general plan and Measure T consistency. So tonight we're looking at more zoning code amendments, and we've kind of categorized them in three buckets. The first one is streamlining the development review process, which is part of policy H1.6. There's essentially three items that I'll discuss that fit within that bucket. We are also addressing or requiring minimum densities and mixed-use residential development projects, part of policy H1.9. And we're updating the city's below market rate, or what is otherwise known as the Inclusionary program, and policy H1.3. And specifically, we're adding guidelines for the on-site, alternatives for the on-site affordable housing requirements. So we're proposing one ordinance to update zoning code amendments, and then a resolution to update specific guidelines in the city's BMR program or inclusionary program. So in the first bucket of streamlining the development review process, again, there's three items in here. The first one is establishing an appeals process for a project that is determined by staff to be incomplete. So this is when an applicant submits an application, we have a list of requirements that the applicant has to fulfill. If staff believes and determines that the application is incomplete, state law under the Permit Streamlining Act says that we have to give that applicant an appeals process. State law outlines the general requirements, but we do need to adopt a code to address how the appeals process will be completed. So state law does require that we have to make a written determination within 60 calendar days, and we are choosing the Planning Commission to make that final determination. And we also determined that an applicant needs to make that appeal for an incomplete determination within 14 days of staff making that determination. So that's the first item in this bucket. The second item is amending the zoning code to allow the zoning administrator to approve up to 2 extensions, each for up to 2 years. So currently, there is 1 2-year extension that's allowed. An initial planning application, it's approved for 2 years, and then the applicant needs to submit a building permit application within that 2-year period, and they get an additional 6 months to pull the building permit. So in total, a building permit needs to be pulled within 2.5 years from the planning application approval. This amendment would change that to give the 2-year extensions, or a total of 6.5 years from the planning application approval. We are recommending to remove language which automatically extends an application when there's an associated tentative subdivision map. So it's a little bit of, I guess, credit for us removing this automatic extension to give a developer up to 2 years in addition to the existing 2-year extension. There are findings that have to be made, so a developer doesn't automatically get the 2-year extensions, but we're proposing this in the code. And then the final item under streamlining the development review process is modifying the requirements when a development project is supposed to go to city council for approval. So currently, the zoning code requires all projects over 55 feet in height to go to city council for approval. Given the fact that our general plan has now changed the maximum heights allowed in a variety of zoning districts, we have recommended this to be increased. And I think the graphic Yeah, sorry. So this just gives an example of where we have a variety of building height maximums, and you can see that in different mixed use districts, we allow all the way up to 8 stories. And so a project that is consistent with the height allowed in the general plan would either go to the zoning administrator, because we are trying to streamline the process, and council allows up to 99 units to go to the zoning administrator. So if it's 99 units and up to the height allowed in the general plan, then it would stay at zoning administrator. If it goes over the heights, our proposal is if it goes over the heights in the general plan, then that's when it would go to city council. We have not defined a numerical value for stories. We are working on that, and we believe that will be probably one of the first things that will be addressed in the comprehensive zoning code update. Just to give some okay, well, I'll go into the next bucket, but that's the last streamlining proposal that we have for the projects that would go to city council. So in the second bucket of proposals for the zoning code amendments, we're looking at policy H 1.9 in the housing element. We committed to establish minimum densities for mixed use residential projects, and those are based on general plan 2040 land use designations. We did discuss this, or staff took this item in a council study session on August 14th of 2024, and the council directed staff that they were interested in minimum densities for mixed use housing development projects. And they were also interested in establishing higher minimum densities near Caltrain stations. So what is before you tonight is our proposal to establish minimum densities in all mixed use land use designations that were established in the general plan, with slightly higher minimum densities for areas within a half mile of the Caltrain stations. So up on the slide is what we're proposing when projects are within a half mile from Caltrain stops, and then also outside of the half mile from Caltrain stops. You can see where we have categorized some of the land uses within the Caltrain stops with slightly higher densities than, I should say minimum densities than those outside of that half mile radius area. And this is the graphic from the general plan showing the land use designations and those half mile areas that are outlined in the dashed line. And we can come back to this if you want to look at that more. Okay, so the third bucket is our zoning code amendments to update the city's below market rate program, and I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, commissioners. The zoning code amendment that I'll be discussing is, as Steve said, updating the city's below market rate or inclusionary program. These words can be used interchangeably in this presentation. This aligns with policy H13 in the housing element, as Steve mentioned. H13, the goal of H13 is to increase affordable housing production through various means, including by updating the BMR program, and specifically by allowing more compliance options than what exist today. These amendments will provide alternatives to what we call the on-site requirement. So the baseline requirement right now under the ordinance is to provide 15% affordable units either at the lower income level for rentals or moderate income for sale. This is for developments of 11 or more units. Doing this is also supported by state law, not only by the Housing Element Implementation Plan. And I should say that currently in the BMR guidelines, there is an option to build units off-site, but this is limited to projects where building the units on-site is economically infeasible. And so the onus is on the developer to demonstrate that, and it's limited to those developments where the city council could make such findings or staff could make such findings. So what we're looking at this evening is how to create some additional flexibility to incentivize affordable housing production. Next slide, please. So staff researched many other jurisdictions. We provided a summary in the report as one of the attachments with a lot of jurisdictions and various compliance options, as you'll see. It was hard to fit it all on one page, but the most common ones, which are also provided in the report and are listed here, are in lieu fees. Now, we won't be discussing that really this evening because the developer pays a fee instead of providing or constructing the affordable units. That's not really the objective here of the policy of H13. And in addition, when an in lieu fee payment is made, it does go into a pot of funds that are intended to support affordable housing production. But there could be a years-long delay before those units are built, and those funds need to be leveraged with other funds to create those units. So we're looking at other options as an alternative to the on-site. Land dedication is another one that you'll find in many jurisdictions, either code or in their accompanying guidelines. And this is basically where the developer provides a site other than the one where they are building the main development. And that site is used for off-site affordable unit construction. But the dedication part is that the developer provides the land. Sometimes it's deeded to the city. But often the preferred method is to a development partner, such as a nonprofit development partner, to then build all affordable units on the site. There's the off-site construction option, which is in many jurisdictions' ordinances today. This allows for a developer to build the affordable units off-site. Whatever is required of the project, those units can be constructed off-site. There's acquisition and rehab. So this is an option that several cities have, several jurisdictions have, that allows a developer to acquire some existing units that are naturally affordable units that require some degree of rehabilitation. And they do that and deed restrict the units, and that fulfills their affordable housing requirement. Now, doing that can be quite complex because the city has to establish an equivalency of how many units are required by the affordable housing or inclusionary ordinance and how many units are being provided through the acquisition and rehab. But some cities do have this option. And then there is the developer proposed alternative, which really varies. Some cities leave it extremely open-ended, propose an option to the city, and the city council will find whether or not it is an acceptable alternative. So we have bolded two of these here, offsite construction and developer proposed alternative. And I will get into those in the subsequent slide. But before we move to the next slide, I also want to point out that while we are looking at this specific update to the BMR program and the ordinance, there will be a comprehensive BMR program revision in 2026. This is also in the housing element. So that will allow for additional analysis of all of these options and further additions and amendments to the policy and to the ordinance. Next slide, please. So what staff recommends this evening is that the Planning Commission recommend two amendments to the code to allow for these updates to the city's ordinance. And I should say the city's ordinance is very short. Most of the BMR program or policy is found in the BMR program guidelines. And so that's why Steve mentioned there is a resolution this evening, because it is important to update those guidelines. That's where all the information is for how to comply and what the requirements are of the ordinance. So the two options are the offsite construction option, as I mentioned, and both of these options would have to be approved by the city council. And the way that the city council would make that determination is to make these findings, which we've put into the guidelines in the track changes document that was attached to the report. These include meeting or exceeding the affordable unit requirement. So whatever that requirement was, the 15% affordable units, either at lower income or moderate income, the developer must demonstrate that this can be met by building the units offsite. The site itself also has to be consistent with the general plan and housing element. So it needs to be possible to build those units on that site. There has to be a viable financing plan in place. So there has to be some evidence that it is feasible to build the units on the site. The site and the construction of units on the site should affirmatively further fair housing. So that's AFFH here, meet AFFH objectives, which are also in the housing element. And the units should be delivered concurrently. So when the main development, whether commercial development or mixed use or market rate development is completed, the BMR units should also be made available. And if not, then the developer has to follow a phasing plan, which is already provided for in the guidelines. Number two, the developer proposed alternative is much more open-ended. It also would require city council approval, and the city council would find that, and this should say, apologies, meeting or exceeding the affordable housing requirement, so similar to the offsite compliance option. Also, the developer needs to demonstrate consistency with the general plan and housing element, goals of the general plan and housing element in whatever this alternative is. There also needs to be demonstrated financial feasibility. And if the proposed alternative, whatever it is, and it's often one of the other options that I went over on the previous slide, if the alternative cannot meet the affordable housing requirement, the baseline requirement, the on-site requirement, such as it is, the 15%, then the developer has to demonstrate that the project can provide greater public benefit than building the units on site. So these are kind of the threshold findings for the city council to make that determination as to whether or not it's an acceptable alternative to the on-site baseline option. And the next slide, it simply shows, as I mentioned, what needs to be done to make these updates. So on the left is the affordable housing section there. That will be updated slightly, as you can see in the attachment to the report. And then importantly, on the right is just a snippet from the below market rate program guidelines. These were last updated in 2020, also by resolution. And so this resolution would update or amend those guidelines. Okay, I think that does it for the inclusionary portion, and I'm going to hand it back to Steve.
Okay, and then just finally some highlights on what's to come. We are looking at amending the city's ADU ordinance, which is in chapter 27.19. We do need to align it with state law and resolve inconsistencies identified by HCD. We did receive a letter in November of 2024 from HCD, and the city did comment back or respond back to the letter, and we committed to updating the ordinance in 2025. And then under policy H1.7, we are committed to evaluating zoning code standards to support housing production. Those include covered parking, floor area ratios, and then other parking, off-street parking requirements to support housing production. I would say that we are currently implementing a law called AB 2097, which you might be familiar with, which restricts the city from requiring parking within a half mile of major transit stops. And we're also implementing parking reductions under the density bonus requirements that developers can receive parking reductions as an incentive. So we are, although our code hasn't been updated, we have been implementing these policies. And then for tonight, we are proposing the adoption of the ordinance to be categorically exempt under CEQA guideline 15183, which is projects consistent with the community plan or zoning. The city did adopt an EIR for the general plan, and the proposed project tonight is consistent with the densities that are proposed in the general plan, and there's no unusual peculiar impacts that the project tonight would propose. So we believe that it's consistent with that CEQA exemption. With regards to public comments and noticing, we did notice it in the newspaper, the planning e-newsletter that gets sent out via email, and the planning division's What's Happening webpage. And we have not received any public comments on this item. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance to amend the zoning code Title 27, which to address affordable housing compliance options, including development of off-site units or develop proposed alternative, and also code amendments to amend the planning application procedures, and also code amendments for minimum densities for residential mixed-use development projects. Staff is also recommending that the Planning Commission recommend City Council approval of a resolution to update the city's below market rate program. And that concludes our presentation. And after public comment, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. I believe typically we do public comment first before we ask our questions. So I will go ahead and open public comment for this agenda item. If there is anyone in person who would like to speak on item number 2, housing element implementation, please submit a speaker slip at this time. If there's anyone watching who would like to comment via Zoom, please raise your hand at this time.
Through the chair, we have no public comments.
Okay, thank you so much. I will go ahead and close public comment for this agenda item. Now I will look to my fellow commissioners to ask if anyone has any questions for staff. Commissioner Clafter, would you like to go first?
Well, I had asked a question, and we were talking about it for a minute before the meeting, but I'll reiterate it now, about I was looking at the BMR guidelines, and I know there was a comment about how we wouldn't touch on fees, but I was looking at the existing, fees, and I had a question about projects that fall in that sort of 4 to 10 unit, or I guess 5 to 10 unit area where we were currently asking developers or applicants to pay an in lieu fee. And I was just trying to figure out how many projects in that range have actually been applied for or constructed in the last few years.
I don't have a number off the top of my head. I'm sure we could come up with that number, but and I should say I have been here for a year. So in the year that I've been here, there has been one development, I think, where there was an in lieu fee payment, but it actually was to pay for a fraction of a unit. So the in lieu fee comes into play when the unit is between that 5 and 11, or when the calculation for a larger development leads to a fraction of a unit. So I think the only time I've seen it in my time here is a fraction of a unit. I don't think there have been very many applications where this fee payment comes into play.
Okay, yeah, because I had also looked at the fund, the below market rate fund, and it appeared to have stayed pretty flat from 2019, 2020 to now, about 258,000 in there, I think.
Yeah, it's not ballooning from all these payments. Absolutely.
Yeah. think that was the one question that I had asked.
Commissioner Bnetter, any questions?
Through the chair. If we could go to slide 5 of 17, please. So I see that you have to appeal within 14 days to the city. And the planning commission has to reply within 60 calendar days. Is the appeal 14 calendar days or 14 working days?
It would be 14 calendar days.
Okay. And slide 8 on 17, please. So why have we determined that within a half mile location of a Caltrain stop and outside of the half mile, why are we going with different minimum densities?
So this is also consistent with the transit-oriented communities or TOC policy that MTC is heading, which we got a grant for. So it's in looking at what their policies are, we're trying to align where we would like to see more density. And so within that half mile area from a Caltrain stop, we believe there's opportunity to require developers to have more density or at least minimum densities within that. And outside of that half mile radius to allow developers to have essentially less density there. This is not maximums, these are just minimum densities. So we'd still look at the general plan as far as maximum densities. So I think it's just the the general idea of land use near Caltrain stops to support the transit. And also, if you look at the map, those mixed use projects, we're looking at the transit hubs and being able to support more dense uses within those areas and requiring developers to provide that to the city.
Okay.
And this was also a directive by the council to have higher densities within the areas located in proximity to the Caltrain stops.
Okay. Could you go to slide 12, please? So for the off-site construction option, is this intended to be standalone, low-cost housing units, or could they be built in mixed-use units that are off-site doing, a full range of residential units, including low-cost housing, or how do you see this program being implemented?
The findings that the city council has to make don't box it in to either one of those two options. I think realistically, based on the few times that I've seen this alternative used in other cities, you get an offsite traditional or what you would expect affordable units on their own, but this does not preclude some other proposal that may include those units. The importance is that the offsite option meets or exceeds what that development has to provide. So if the developer can demonstrate that and also meet these other requirements, and and show that the units can be delivered concurrently with the main development, the commercial or market rate development, then I do not think that this option automatically eliminates that. It would just be probably a more complex proposal.
Sure. So now that I'm thinking about it, so if you were actually trying to meet your requirement on and using the offsite construction option, um, how would you control not getting a higher state density bonus added to that project? Or would there be an additional state density bonus for higher percentages of low-cost housing on that property?
Well, density bonus is available to a project where it's one project. And so I think the state law defines that as it doesn't have to be on the same parcel, but they have to be contiguous parcels and they have to be one project. So in this case, if the developer were providing the units off-site, that would not be, if unless the off-site is perhaps contiguous. I'm not sure. I haven't thought through that theoretical or hypothetical, but constructing them off-site would not qualify the development further for density bonus.
Okay, great. That's it for my questions. I will have some comments later. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nugent, do you have any questions?
Yes, through the chair. Some of the questions I had were already asked, but they actually are on this zoning code amendment, the ones that I have remaining. The question I have first with the offsite construction option is, would a developer contributing money towards another, say, fully subsidized, fully below market rate affordable housing project that would be developed by another developer, say like a mid-pen or something, contributing money towards those units, but not that it would just be a portion of that development? Would that be what we're talking about for an option for the offsite construction option? So say there's a concurrent just market rate development and a concurrent affordable housing development elsewhere. Is this saying that the developer could pay whatever number of units that would be required of that market rate development inclusionary program towards this separate development to meet the offsite construction option? Is that what we're talking about? Or does it have to be a separate building that just contains the percentage that would be included within the market rate development?
I think the most straightforward application of this option is that the developer controls multiple sites and is the one constructing the main development and the one constructing the offsite units, because they control everything. They control the site, they control the financing, they control the timing. So that's, I think, what is contemplated under this umbrella of offsite construction. By the same token, again, and you can see what's in the guidelines, what we've proposed, could there be a very creative proposal that happens to meet these criteria and doesn't run into some, what I would imagine are some pretty big roadblocks to being able to meet all those criteria by doing something like what you described? I think that would be up for the city council to consider and decide on. But again, it would have to meet the same bar. So it would be much more difficult for the developer to do. So I think, in terms of the intent and what we've looked at what other jurisdictions do, we are really contemplating that one developer doing this. But again, that might fall into the developer proposed alternative, number 2, right? Where if the developer can make that arrangement and make that case, then it could be possible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. The other question on this topic I had was regarding specifically meeting AFFH objectives. Do we have any criteria for that? Is it about making sure that the offsite affordable component is within a similar level of my mind is
Resource
yeah,
area?
resource area. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that's certainly would be one of them, one of the more obvious ones. Yeah. Yeah. We left it more open-ended than that because we have, a whole AFFH plan in our housing element and analysis. So it's not only that, but that would be absolutely one of them. Yes. If the developer showed that where they're proposing to build is in an equally, perhaps the main development's a high resource area, it's an equally high resource area, that would certainly be in the direction of meeting the AFFH objectives.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then, so for this inclusionary program, would the 2026 anticipated revisions and relook at this, is this also corresponding to the housing element policy H 1.3, or is that a different policy that we're talking about?
It's a different policy. There's an additional policy in the implementation plan that obligates the city to undertake a revision. So it's not only under, as we've been discussing for the for just an alternative to the on-site. I do not have the exact policy number on off the top of my head.
That's okay. You answered my question. Yeah.
But yes, it is. There is more in the housing element that obligates the city to take a big look at just an overhaul of the program, a potential overhaul of the program, and not only zooming in on alternatives to the on-site option.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Commissioner Williams?
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions. So regarding the BMR inclusionary program, I guess maybe these are more comments, but I do kind of want to know the background of this, I guess. And so when I think of San Mateo, which is a fairly diverse city in terms of economic diversity, I guess I can see where this is going, but I can't help but think about how in some cities in our region that are, high income, high cost cities, small cities like Hillsborough or something that are not necessarily as economically diverse as us. Doesn't this allow the developer to separate out affordable housing and sort of, isn't it sort of counterproductive to the idea of sort of integrating affordable housing within a project and a region and a community? And I guess that's a bigger question that maybe is part of comments, but I'm just wondering, did the authors, what exactly is the intent that the authors of this had? Is it really just to sort of streamline housing in any manner possible? Is that too big of a question to ask?
I think it's one of the things that we often think about when we look at our inclusionary program is if our objective is the delivery of affordable units, and that's the only one, then what are the most effective ways of getting there? But I think as you're stating, there are other objectives. It's not only we want to produce affordable units, we want to meet the city's housing needs. We want to affirmatively further fair housing. We want to expand access to opportunity through the location of housing. So, access to amenities, etc. We want to be consistent with the general plan and housing element, which go beyond just saying we want to produce more affordable units. So whenever we look at our inclusionary or BMR ordinance, we have to look at what are potential trade-offs and what is that equilibrium, where we're getting units perhaps not all of those units are within a larger market rate or a mixed use or a development. I will say that the flexibility is important as well. So that's another factor in incentivizing the production of units. And this is one of the chief reasons why other cities have these options. It's why state law has really pushed jurisdictions to go beyond just requiring on-site, because there are simply some developments where building off-site makes more sense. The findings that we developed for both 1 and 2 are intended to act, I think, a bit as guardrails to make sure that what is being built offsite is not just it's the affordable units over there, and they're just separated from this larger development, but it actually serves multiple ends, even though the units are offsite. So
Mhm.
the bar is higher for doing either one of these two options than just building the units as part of the main development, right? So I don't know if Zach wanted to make any comments on that too, but I think that's it's an important point, and it will certainly be part of the excuse me, of the 2026 revision, is thinking about how do we strike that balance.
Mhm. And then one other question, just to kind of make sure I'm clear on it. So these are what's proposed, and if I, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense, but if they weren't acceptable, for instance, to the Planning Commission, then we would have the default of the in lieu fees as our default required option. Is that correct?
We don't currently have the in lieu fee as an option. It applies specifically to when the development is smaller, so the 5 to 11 units, or when there is like I said, a fraction of a unit required. And so a developer can't just say, I'm going to fee out, I'm going to pay the in lieu fee and not build the units. That's not an option.
Well, I guess my question is, in order to meet the requirements, staff is recommending these two options. If we didn't like these two options, let's say, I'm not saying I don't, but I'm just saying, like, what does the city or planning commission, or, what's the fallback, I guess, for, there was a number of different options, and these two, I mean, I'm not saying they don't make sense. I just want to know what the process is if we didn't have this. I see that, like, some cities, like Newark, for instance, just has the in lieu fee. They don't, or maybe they have something else too. They have the alternative also. So I'm just wondering what the law require, or what the policy allows for. I mean, you may have talked about this already, but I guess I want to clarify that.
Well, the commitment in the housing element doesn't say that you have to have an off-site construction option, right? It did say it's an alternative to on-site. So I think if the planning commission did not agree or support these options this evening, then we would have to come up with other ones. We definitely still have to develop an alternative to the on-site option. I think leaving the status quo is not an option, but there, as you can see, there are other iterations of that. And so we would have to go back and go back to the drawing board. Zach.
Okay.
Good evening.
Um,
If I could just
okay.
build off of pardon me, hello, Zach, Community Development Director. Just wanted to add a few more points to what Rachel was saying about this. One, state law does require that we have an alternative to our standard inclusionary requirement. So I think the starting point for any project is you have to comply with our inclusionary program, which is if you're over 11 units or more, you have to provide at least 15% of your units base density as affordable within the project. So that's kind of the default if, say, the Planning Commission didn't like the proposed alternative, and there would be findings that go along with it. But state law does require this. The other thing is, in order to be eligible for density bonus concessions and waivers, the units have to be provided. If they pay in lieu fee, that they lose their eligibility under state density bonus law. So they're also, a project is motivated generally to build the units rather than try to fee out because of the access to density bonus concessions and waivers. And I think the key is these are alternatives. And so we would start with compliance with our BMR program. However, if for various reasons that the developer articulates that doesn't work, maybe the location of their project isn't optimal for housing. And so maybe there's a better location for housing, and then they can do office or commercial or the other uses they're proposing on their site. And then they have a different site that maybe is more conducive to housing. So that might be a scenario where it makes sense to not include housing on the primary site, but they want access, say, to concessions or waivers. So that might be a scenario where it makes sense. But I think looking at those findings and a higher bar, ideally, we're looking at maybe a higher than 15% inclusionary requirement. So it's off-site, but maybe they're giving us 20 or 25% of the units. So those are kind of some of the things that would also play into this.
Well, thank you for that. But my question isn't so much that as from a state point of view, what if we're trying to come up with a zoning code amendment to comply with this state requirement? And, item 1 and 2 on screen are not the only options. There's a whole bunch of different things. I guess my question is there like a default that, we don't necessarily want to go with the default. These are well thought out, but I have a hard time understanding what the authors of this requirement were intending. And in lieu fees, for instance, if that's the default, to me, that doesn't really meet the objectives of getting housing completed. So anyway, I don't mean to belabor it, but I don't find it very clear, like what the state wants, for instance, or what their state requires, I guess I should say. But I think I'll move on to my other question. And my other question is about the streamlining of the approval process. So in appealing an incomplete determination, it seems like a developer may get a pass on some potentially important components of an application. So I want to know from staff if they see, two questions, I guess. How likely is this appeal process to be even utilized? And secondly, does staff see that there's a potential for some important components to be left out of a submittal application?
Through the chair, I think state law has this requirement in the Permit Streamlining Act for cities that may act unfair. I'll just use unfairly against a developer to keep on saying a project is incomplete when maybe a developer thinks that they have submitted all the materials and the city keeps asking for the same materials and not letting them have a completeness to move on in the process. We're collaborating with developers, and after we send an incomplete letter to them, we follow up with meetings and we're talking to them specifically about the materials that need to be submitted. And I think so far in my experience as a planner and experience with the developer so far in working with the city, I don't see this coming up very often. Again, there are cities that I would say maybe deliberately or undeliberately or deny what they're doing, but maybe delaying some of the processing of applications. So again, it's kind of those guardrails for staff to work within our requirements and then giving a developer a way to get the city to move along the process.
Okay, that's
If I
helpful.
may
Thank
add
you.
to that, I think your specific question is what is to stop potentially important components from being left out of the application. And I think the answer is the Planning Commission. If they appeal it to the Planning Commission, it's then on the Planning Commission to review the application and determine if it's complete. And so I would think if something obvious is missing, the planning commission would notice that.
I think that's a big responsibility for people that are not the same level of expertise as planning staff. However, I hear what you're saying, so that answers my question really well. I'm thinking of it in terms of City of San Mateo, and not everybody's as great as City of San Mateo.
Yeah.
So great, thank you.
I mean,
That's all.
through the chair, I would invite the city attorney to speak on it, but in the planning commission would be reviewing this as kind of a quasi judicial review. If a applicant is asking for the planning commission to make a determination on an appeal, then you're kind of acting in that role in this situation.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right. I only have one question that I apologize I thought of during this discussion, so I did not ask staff ahead of time. On page 3 of the staff report, and this is talking about the conditions that trigger the minimum density requirements. Page 3 of the staff report says, however, in a few cases, projects have provided only a small residential component to qualify for concessions and waivers under the primary state density bonus law to benefit the commercial component of the project. I just wanted to confirm how many units of residential are required to be eligible for the state density bonus waivers and concessions. I believe it is 5, but wanted to confirm that.
Correct.
Okay, great. And that is why the recommendation is for 5 units or more. So those were all of my questions. Shall we move on to discussion? Or do we have any more questions? No. Okay, great. I would suggest, in order to keep this as streamlined and as efficient and simple as possible, that we go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each of the 5 items before us one at a time. And if any commissioners have any comments or want to discuss, we do them one at a time rather than trying to do them all at once. So I would propose that we start by discussing the alternative compliance options for required on-site affordable dwelling units. So the BMR alternatives. So I will start by asking my fellow commissioners, does anyone want to discuss the recommendation of the staff?
Yes, I had some comments on the BMR portion of the discussion tonight.
Please go ahead.
Okay, well, yeah, through the chair. Yeah, I had asked that question earlier about the lower unit projects, 5 to 10 unit projects, because I was thinking about some of the other policy goals that we have. I'm trying to think a bit like holistically on this, I was asking that question about how many have actually been proposed, because I know that the economics of scale, sometimes for missing middle, which is one of the policy goals that we want to try and promote, which is H.1.12. Sometimes, for those types of projects, you might have, it might be more difficult to provide something on site. Sometimes these fees can make those scales of projects difficult to pencil out, and the end result is we just don't see them because they don't get proposed. And so the end result is, if it doesn't get proposed, we don't get any fees, we don't get the housing, we just don't see it. So just looking ahead to this comprehensive review, I was thinking it would be worthwhile to think about 1.12 and 1.17. 1.12, which is, we want to promote the production of missing middle housing, which is that 4 to 10 unit scale, and with the goal of approximately 50 units of missing middle workforce housing. And think about, and then 1.17, which is study cumulative permit fees, costs for new housing development of various sizes. If we talk to people who are developing at that scale and say, like, what's your per square foot cost? What kind of fees can that scale support? Or what kinds of things can that support? The other thing too is that, if we're proposing this alternative instead of the fee, if you're working on a small project, 4 to 10 units, you're not, doing this large scale project. You don't have a spot where you can take this, housing and build it elsewhere, or you don't necessarily have.
Let me perhaps ask a clarifying question of staff to see if I can understand what some of your concerns are. So I believe that currently for projects that are these small scale, so projects that provide I believe it's 6 to 10 units, more than 5 units. For projects that are below 10 units, above 5 units and below 11 units, I believe that is where right now we do not require the units to be built, but we do ask for an in lieu fee. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with these two alternatives that are being added, the alternatives for offsite construction or an applicant to provide some other option, would projects that are in that range of 6 to 10 units, could they make use of these alternatives as well? Or would they still be required to pay an in lieu fee?
The objective or the intent was for it to apply to those developments where there's an on-site requirement, which means there are 11 units or more.
So these options would only apply to 11 units or more. Are you saying that you would like these options to apply to the 6 to 10 unit projects?
Through the chair. I think I probably have to excuse me if I started to ramble a little bit there. I think I'm generally supportive, but I think of the proposals for tonight. I think I like this idea that there's going to be this more comprehensive review in 2026, and I think what I was getting at is I just like to kind of think about how we can use that comprehensive review to look at these smaller scale projects and think about how these fees and how these other and how flexibility at that level as well might make those missing middle projects, which we are also trying to support under a different policy goal, more feasible. Because ultimately, I think we have to think about flexibility at all levels, and in order to make projects economically viable, because ultimately, if we end up saying like maybe the fee needs to be reduced, or maybe the numbers need to be adjusted in some way, some benefit is better than no benefit, because ultimately, if it doesn't work, we're just not going to see it. We're not going to know, because the only way we will know it's not working is because we just won't see any projects proposed.
Sure. So I think we can consider that as part of the future investigation.
Yeah, and so it's technically it's not directly tonight, but I felt like now is a good time to bring it up and say, hey, let's think about this over the next year.
Okay. Great. Did you have any other comments or proposed alternatives to what the staff is recommending for the BMR specifically?
I appreciate that. There's a flexible option for some more flexibility to project applicants, because again, I think there's not going to be a one size fits all solution for every project. The conditions are always going to be different. So in general, I support the proposal this evening. Yeah.
Commissioner Ebnetter, I'm going to start calling on people. Do you have any comments about the options that staff is proposing?
Through the chair, I do have a couple of recommendations or questions. So, like Margaret, I am not a fan of building separate housing units as BMR units, excluding them from being in what I'll call the general population for obvious reasons. Yet I understand the importance of having the ability to build elsewhere. I think that these recommendations will meet state requirements, yet I don't see them being all that feasible to be performed in the city of San Mateo because of the difficulty in even finding spare land. But, just to meet state law, I think they make a lot of sense. For the below market resolution, I have a couple of recommendations and/or comments. I know that part of the requirement is that the applicant must demonstrate via an economic analysis that on-site construction is infeasible. And what I'm curious about is who would pay for and contract to get that analysis done? And would there be an option also to have a third-party peer review of that analysis to make sure that we are getting accurate information to make our decisions on? And that is a question to staff.
That language is in the guidelines currently, and we are proposing to strike that language and not require that. So if I think I'm understanding, you were citing
So
the requirement to show that it's infeasible to build the units on the site.
correct. Is that part of the resolution going forward?
It would not be in the guidelines
It would not be. And
anymore.
so there will not be a financial analysis done.
That demonstrates that building the units on site is infeasible? No, because that's the specific language that is in the guidelines right now, because it's basically it's limiting it to those developments where it's just not even possible to build the units on the site, on the same site.
I may ask staff to put the slide up that actually has the two options that are being proposed, because those two options being proposed have bullet points underneath them showing exactly what would be required to utilize that option. So there's no economic analysis, I believe, required under either option.
Why wouldn't there be an economic analysis required?
Because these two options would not require it to be infeasible, would not require the on-site production or construction of units to be infeasible in order to allow the developer to utilize either one of these two.
Okay.
So there could be an economic analysis that is required to support these findings. It just wouldn't be the same as what is currently in the guidelines, which is really very clearly saying you have to show that it's not feasible at all to build the units on a site.
This is about providing developers more flexibility. So, yeah.
And I don't know how this would relate specifically, but for the rental unit affordable housing standards, and I don't have the page number that this is written on, but it's under item number B, which is move-in costs. And it says that the total cost and security deposits to occupy a unit shall be limited to first and last month's rent, plus a cleaning deposit not to exceed 1 month's rent. So for this evening's discussion, how does that apply as it pertains to these solutions, if you will?
I believe you're referring to the section on the rental unit affordable housing standards.
Yes.
Okay, so this is where we say that the rents are restricted to the levels that they are.
Yes.
And yes, that would not be, are you asking if that would be affected by using one of these two alternatives?
Well, it seems that that language is very costly for a family to be able to cover those costs to be able to move into an affordable unit. And I was curious if that is part of any of these discussions where, this is definitely a hindrance to a lot of people to be able to even apply for affordable housing units. So if our goal is to make it easier for people to meet these standards, it seems like these move-in costs are somewhat prohibitive.
I think that's certainly something that would be part of the 2026 round of revisions. Because this one is focused on the on-site alternatives, looking at what are essentially, terms of rental terms of a lease or lease up was, it's just not part of the scope of tonight's specific code amendments. But certainly when we open this up for a full, looking at a full revision, that would be something that we take into account.
Okay, great. That was all I had.
Great. Commissioner Nugent. Any comments on the BMR proposals?
My general sense of these two proposals, I don't think that either of these will likely get used. I think that separate concurrent construction on two non-contiguous sites seems to be too high of a hurdle for most infill development in a city like ours. Now, there might be an occasional project, perhaps, that could come along where that occurs, but it seems unlikely that that would occur. That being the case, I'm not going to oppose providing this as an option. I don't have high hopes to see it come to fruition. And then secondly, I think the developer proposed alternative seems to have too much uncertainty, and that developers would likely be unable to plan and pro forma and determine project feasibility without a significant investment in a process that doesn't provide any sort of guarantees for approval. I don't know. Perhaps it's so open-ended, the developer proposed alternative, that it's really difficult to understand or wrap my head around when a developer would try to do that. Again, I'd be happy to be surprised if it does result in more units or a better outcome. But to me, it seems a little bit daunting for developers to go through a process with so much uncertainty. And then thirdly, just to kind of piggyback on some of the earlier comments, I would recommend that in the future, the city investigate a sliding scale on its affordable percentage requirement, so that it might shrink for smaller sized projects and grow for larger projects in order to maximize our ability to get affordable housing produced. I think that if we can better accommodate economies of scale with our affordable housing percentage requirements, and it may prevent, like on the low end, the infeasibility of smaller missing middle, and then it might allow us to get more affordable units with larger projects that we're just leaving on the table, perhaps. So those are my thoughts on this.
But I'm just going to be super. You'd be okay with these alternatives.
I'm okay. I'm just skeptical as far as these actually getting used.
All right, Commissioner Williams, any comments on these?
Well, I generally agree with what Commissioner Nugent said, but I am still, in addition to that, though, I'm still a little unclear, like if I didn't like these, or if none of us liked these, what we would end up with. But anyway, after considering it, I think that they are acceptable. I mean, I was sort of thinking about, like, well, where are they more likely? They're actually more likely in our city than in a city that is smaller and more, I don't know, less commercial. I could potentially see if a developer had two sites and wanted to do all the housing on one site and all of something else on another site. I don't know. I think the key thing that will make me feel okay about this is that what Rachel said is that, these are intended to be guardrails for us to be sure that we're meeting the overall goals of bringing affordable housing along with some market rate housing. And so anyway, I think if I analyze it too much, I feel like it's counterintuitive to what we're trying to do. Why are we giving the developers so much flexibility? They should be working within the same kind of, guidelines and goals, and that's not impossible. Okay, all of that said, I think they're acceptable as opposed to in lieu fees or nothing.
Thank you. I have no comments on this one, so I think I am hearing a consensus to agree to these two recommendations. The next item before us on the list is the provisions for appeal procedures for processing applications. So shall we go in the same order? And does anyone have any comments on these proposed changes or suggestions to revise them if you are concerned about what is being suggested? I see no from Commissioner Clafter, no from Commissioner Nugent, or sorry, Commissioner Netter.
No, I find that these are
Great.
Beyond my expertise to be able to provide any useful input.
I think staff kind of satisfied my questions
Great.
during the question period. And I mean, does this streamlining piece also included the additional 2-year extension request, which I support that. I think that is sort of the way projects go, that we see people coming back for extensions as it is. So I'm in favor of that.
Great.
Yeah, my note on that, I made a note and I just said sign of the times.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Sorry for me scrolling up and down in all my notes. I'm going by the staff report. Modify provisions for planning approval, expiration, and extensions. I think we just covered that is part of the same one. Everyone's okay with the 2-year extension. It seems like. I just want to confirm. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And then the next one is modify language for approval authority of development projects that exceed height thresholds. So I'll go down the line again. Any comments on this? Commissioner Clafter?
I think this just brings it kind of in line with Measure T, which made sense to me.
Great.
I agree. The revisions make sense to me.
I'm seeing a yes from everyone. I have comments.
Yeah, through
it's okay.
the chair.
You can go ahead.
I do also agree. I think that we may want to, the city may want to come back and review mixed use high in the future, because the density is 100 to 130 units per acre. We may find that a good portion of mixed use high still is commercial. It's hard to know with once you factor in density bonuses and such. But it could be fine. I just would recommend that this is something that we come back to look at after more projects come in 5 to 10 years.
So I actually had a comment and a potential proposed revision to this one. So anything that exceeds these height limits, what we're saying is anything that exceeds these height limits would then have to be reviewed and approved by the city council. I am wondering if we should propose an exception for projects that are utilizing state density bonus law. And I say that because in many cases, those projects that are using state density bonus law, well, okay, now let me think through this again. An exception, I'm going to revise my comment, an exception for projects that meet the definition of projects that are protected by the Housing Accountability Act, projects that are more than 2/3 residential. I'm going to say that one. And I say this because there's a lot of limitations on the rejection of those projects. They can only be rejected if the city finds that there's a specific and adverse impact to public health and safety. And the findings to determine that, can be challenging. And so what I'm trying to avoid is an extra round of review on projects where the ability to deny them is very limited. And we talked about this a little bit briefly in a different scenario at a previous planning commission meeting where we were talking about projects that meet objective design standards and thus cannot be denied. And we had discussed, should those projects even be reviewed by the planning commission, or could a decision be made at the zoning administrator level? Because if they can't be denied, then what is the purpose of coming before the planning commission? And we as a body talked about, well, a real benefit of them coming to the planning commission is that it gives the public an opportunity to comment in a public hearing. So when there are concerns, our community can feel heard, even if we're very limited in acting on what those concerns are. And in this case, these projects will have already come before the planning commission. So they will have gone through a public hearing. There will have been an opportunity for concerns to be expressed. And so I wonder, does it make sense? Is it a valuable use of time for everyone involved for them to then have to go to the council afterwards as well?
So are you proposing?
I am proposing
adding
adding an exception for projects that are at least 2/3 residential and meet and are protected under the Housing Accountability Act.
Just want to interject one thing that just want to correct one thing that you said though. We do have projects that could be up to 99 units that are approved administratively, so they're not necessarily going to be heard at a public meeting. So just wanted to make sure
that is a really good point. We could have projects that are under 99 units that exceed these height limits, and the only public hearing would be if they were then approved by council. In that case, I may rescind this suggestion because I think it would be too complicated to try to carve out the use case of projects that are protected by the Housing Accountability Act and were above 99 units, so they got the public hearing. That then becomes really complicated to try to make that carve out. And I don't know how many projects would fall into that category anyway. All right, I take it back. Any other comments on this one?
This is actually more of a question. So and I don't know if this is calculable, but with the minimum densities, do we know if any mixed use development with residential is going to be 2/3 residential? Is it just automatically 2/3 ends up being, if it's a mixed use project with our minimum densities that we're proposing, would a mixed use project that
I think it depends on the parcel size.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it would depend.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to push us right along to what I believe is the last one before us, which is the minimum densities for residential mixed-use development projects. I'll go down the line again.
I definitely like this proposal. I had, even before being on the commission, had been reacting with some consternation to some of the projects in areas that could definitely have supported more density being used for office buildings with a sprinkling of housing on top. And I just thought that was very, very strange thing to be seeing specifically here in San Mateo for some reason. So I think this makes a lot of sense just to maximize the density that we have, are offering, particularly, along transit corridors downtown. I think this just makes a lot of sense.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm just unfortunately not really clear what the logic is of having lower minimums outside of the half-inch mile, within a half-inch mile to the how train stops. To me, it would almost be productive to have the same dwelling unit requirement or even more if it makes the property more feasible to be developed, which I think is what we're trying to accomplish. And I don't know how keeping the units at a lower density encourages more production. I'm just at a loss with that. I don't understand the logic. If there is a logic to it, I'm not sure what we're gaining by having two different sets of dwelling units per acre.
I have thoughts, but
Through the chair.
Commissioner Nugent, yes.
I think the potential is that if the minimum is too high, you might see in the mixed use zones just scrapping of residential altogether. So that's a line that the city needs to walk, where say there's a project that's proposing mixed use residential and commercial. And if the percentage is too high for some reason, there might, the project applicant might just not do residential at all. And I'm not sure whether that is affected as much by the distance from Caltrain stop. But at this point, I think I'm relying on staff to make that judgment based on the guidance from the city council previously. But again, I think the issue that is in the back of there is that projects that would potentially have residential would scrap the residential if we created a requirement that's too high. And I think some of the logic here is to avoid mainly commercial projects using density bonus law to supercharge the commercial development. And so this is where I think it's kind of doing two things at once. It's trying to increase the amount of residential just overall as a percentage of projects. And then it's also trying to avoid the use of the density bonus law for commercial, primary commercial projects.
Okay, that makes some sense because historically, the density bonuses were used to a minimum to allow for the bonuses. I just struggle a little bit with the geography that we're looking at in San Mateo, and specifically how much of the El Camino Real and other areas of the city, which are in very small lots, how do we encourage the acquisition and cobbling together those lots to build more? And I think that's going to be an ongoing issue for a long time because we've got a lot of our housing inventory in very small areas and in very small lots. And how do you encourage cobbling them together and building at a higher density? And I think that's going to be an ongoing issue for many, many years. And I don't know how to address it.
Through the chair, this comes back to that missing middle thing, which I mentioned. Smaller lots, smaller projects on smaller lots equates to the higher density, but or medium-sized projects on smaller lots.
Commissioner Nugent, do you have any comments beyond that? Okay. Commissioner Williams?
I just wanted to, I just wanted to comment, Commissioner Clapter's comment that there are projects that could have benefited from this as opposed to, as you said, like a sprinkling of residential on top of a larger commercial building. That didn't really quite make sense. architecturally either. And so, I mean, just in general, I'm not thinking of anything specific, but I think that, it certainly makes sense in terms of housing. And I can think of some projects architecturally that would benefit from that. So yeah, I definitely support that.
Okay. Well, I've got some comments on this one. This is a special interest area of mine. And so I have a lot of comments. I apologize in advance. And I have a proposal. So I'm curious to hear what my fellow commissioners say. If I may go up to my notes. So I think it is great that we are making this requirement for projects that are 5 units or greater, which I believe closes that loophole. I don't know if loophole is the right term, but solves the problem of commercial projects putting a bare minimal amount of 5 units of housing on top of a very large commercial building so that they can get the waivers and concessions that effectively allow them to build more commercial, which is not the spirit of state density bonus law. So I'm really glad that we're solving that problem. I, too, Commissioner Ebnetter, was looking at the differences suggested between within the transit-oriented development and outside of the transit-oriented development. And I don't have a strong opinion on this, but my first blush was these differences seem marginal. And should we potentially have higher minimums closer to Caltrain? Because I think as we look to the future and as we look to sustainable development, putting housing near walkable distances to Caltrain obviously seems beneficial from a sustainability standpoint. So I kind of have this thought in the back of my head that maybe they should be slightly higher, closer to Caltrain. But then I hear Commissioner Nugent make a really good point, which is if we accidentally go too high, we might incentivize the scrapping of residential altogether, and we definitely don't want to do that, especially within walkable distances from Caltrain. So I feel like this is one of those things where like we got to put a number out there and we got to see what happens, and then we got to be open to revising these numbers if we find that they're having unexpected or undesirable effects. A 50 dwelling unit per acre minimum, I think, will still result in projects that are wildly imbalanced. And one of my hopes with doing minimum densities is that we solve the problem of wildly imbalanced projects from a jobs to housing ratio. We routinely see mixed use projects come before the commission that will build up to the 50 dwelling unit per acre maximum under the previous Measure Y, add in the maximum state density bonus law, still have a bunch of FAR left over, fill that FAR with commercial, and then have an overall project that is still unbalanced. And so I'll give you 2 examples. I went through all of my notes. Block 21 had a total of 111 residential units, which was the max under Measure Y and almost the entirety of the 50% state density bonus. Also had 179,560 square feet of commercial, which created a jobs to housing ratio of about 8-1. Pretty imbalanced. A healthy jobs to housing ratio is 1.5-1. The original proposal of Block 20, not the revised one, had a total of 86 units, which was the max under Measure Y and the 50% state density bonus, and 142,000 square feet of office with a jobs to housing ratio of 8.25-1. So I feel like if the goal of minimum residential densities is to create more balanced commercial to housing development, that the 50 dwelling units per acre is not the right number. I also am not convinced that this is the right metric. And so my proposal is to suggest an alternative metric, which is actually a ratio of housing units to square feet of commercial, which is what Mountain View has done. And I think it has worked out really well in Mountain View. And I can run through the numbers with you, but I was thinking, and I've put some thought into this, but within the transit-oriented development, for the mixed-use low and the mixed-use medium, 1 unit per 300 square feet of commercial And these numbers are very intentional. So 300 square feet is also what Mountain View uses. And they use that number because generally speaking, 200 square feet of gross usable area of commercial is about one employee in the industry. And so when you have 300 square feet, you're talking about building 1 unit of housing per 1.5 employees, which is that healthy jobs to housing ratio. So I'm saying that within mixed use low and mixed use medium of transit oriented development, we aim for that healthy 1.5 to 1 ratio of 1 unit per 300 square feet. When we go to mixed use high, we actually try to dig ourselves out of the hole a little bit and require 1 unit per 150 square feet of commercial, which would be a 0.75 to 1 jobs to housing ratio. For outside of transit-oriented development, I was thinking for mixed-use low, 1 unit per 800 square feet of commercial. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. For mixed-use medium 1 unit per 500 square feet of commercial is a 2.5 to 1 jobs to housing ratio. For mixed-use medium 2, 1 unit per 300 square foot of commercial. That's that ideal 1.5 to 1. And then again, for mixed-use high, 1 unit per 150 square feet of commercial. So that's 0.75 to 1 jobs to housing ratio. I think a ratio metric will get us closer to producing balanced projects, which I think is the goal of this effort. So I have a couple other suggestions, but I will leave that one out there for now to see what my fellow commissioners think about that.
Through the chair, you said block, was it block 20 or block 21 was your example?
I had both block 20 and block 21 as an example. So both of them built the max at the time, which was 50 units per acre, and then did a 50% state density bonus on top. But then there was still a lot of FAR left over that was filled with commercial space.
Yeah, and so block 20 was 111 units?
That was block 21. It was 111 residential units.
And then 179,000.
179,560 square feet of office space.
179.5.
Divided by 200 square feet is about this gross usable square foot for 1 employee.
200. So that was 200 square feet. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So 179.
If you're trying to get the jobs to housing ratio, if you're trying to figure out how many units it would have built, I'm proposing 1 unit per 300 square feet. So yeah, if you want to do the math real quick.
I think I got like 598 units. And we're proposing, your proposal is to have that ratio be the minimum density. And then the question I have is, is that something that's, is a developer going to come along and say, I want to build 600 units?
Well,
here?
what would happen in that situation is they would lower the amount of commercial, right?
Yeah.
Until they got to a reasonable number of residential.
Yeah. I mean, this is not something that I'm totally versed in, but I've gotten kind of hints from some people and reading and things that, sometimes the commercial component is being used to subsidize the cost of the housing units. And, in certain cases, and again, I don't understand the economics of office space fully, but, I wonder if that ratio is going to make a higher unit count feasible, or if it ends up with a reduced unit count along with the reduced office square footage.
Yeah, I definitely think that in the past, commercial has been used to offset the cost of residential, but I think the economics change so quickly, it's hard to say. Right now, we know that commercial isn't financially viable or as financially viable. And so we're seeing shifts to residential and lower density residential in the current economic climate.
Through the chair, this is a question for you. Have developments been built or proposed in Mountain View using this ratio yet?
I definitely know projects have been entitled using this ratio.
Okay. How old is this?
I do not know that.
Okay.
And was it Commissioner Nugent that brought up the issue, or somebody brought up the issue of, will this, tell me if I'm mixing up my issues, will this backfire and cause, a lack of residential projects. It's definitely a much stricter, you're really swinging the pendulum the other way. And I guess the concern is this going to, create a more difficulty, I guess, in creating housing?
It's a great question. I think I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know is the 50 unit an acre number, which is the most that we are requiring, is still resulting in unbalanced projects. And the other thing I know is that we routinely get comments from the public asking, why are we building more commercial and not building more housing? Or why are we building so much more commercial than we're building housing? And this would be a way to, at least in the mixed use medium and mixed use high, at least within the transit oriented development, to require balanced development. And then outside of the transit oriented development, there's still those two lower options where you could be doing more commercial than the required amount of offset housing.
Could you do me a favor and run through the numbers again for the transit-oriented development?
Sure.
For the two
Yeah.
categories?
So for mixed
didn't
use
take
low and
notes.
mixed use medium one, so where it is currently proposing 30 units per acre, I am proposing 1 unit per 300 square foot of commercial.
But so what did you say the 30 and the 50 equate to in terms of the ratio that you were using?
It totally depends on the amount of commercial that is being proposed, right? I just gave 2 projects as an example where the projects were building the maximum amount of residential they could and still were able to add so much commercial on top of it that the overall project was very imbalanced.
But the 50 I thought was like 1.1 to 1.5.
The 50 number is separate. It's the 300 number that is the 1.5 to 1.
That's what you proposed. It was 300 instead of the 50.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was 1 unit per 300 square feet of commercial for that top left category instead of 30 units per acre.
Through the chair, if I can provide some insights here or comments to consider.
Absolutely.
So I do want to note, and I do want to put this on the record. We've highlighted this before. The city of San Mateo does not have a jobs housing imbalance. It's actually a little over 1 to 1. We have a jobs housing fit imbalance, and we definitely have an affordability imbalance. But the city of San Mateo actually is pretty balanced from jobs to housing. So I do want to just put that on the record. The other part that is important to note is we're a much different context than Mountain View. And so we would need to study to understand how those limits were justified. I think we need to understand if those type of limits here in San Mateo would be consistent with state density bonus law. And it's also important to understand, what are we trying to achieve here? We did have one project that provided the nominal amount of housing and then was able to utilize state density bonus concessions and waivers to benefit primarily the non-residential portion of the project. And so as a response to that project, we wanted to make sure that if a project is going to utilize state density bonus law, thus the threshold of 5 or more, they provide a sufficient number of housing units. This is a starting point. We want to get this on the books because we do have an influx of housing applications coming in. This isn't the last time we'll look at this. It's important to also understand that every project, with the exception of a very small number, have not only gone to our maximum base density, they've then exceeded it under density bonus law. And even new projects, the vast majority are you maximizing our increased densities under the general plan 2040. So we don't have a massive issue here. We have a few projects that have used this, and we want to make sure that everyone's at the same playing field. But it's important to go by units per acre because that's the familiar metric we've done. And maybe if the commission's interested in this, this is a recommendation as part of the larger comprehensive zoning code update. But I would be concerned with switching to this type of metric at this point because we really haven't studied it at all. And I do have concerns that this might not be consistent with state density bonus law to do it this way, short of underlying justifications and rationale.
Thank you for those comments. I think I will take a moment to strongly push back against the assertion that we do not have a jobs to housing imbalance. There's a difference between the jobs to housing ratio and the jobs to household ratio. I know that we've seen data before from PlaceWorks showing that the jobs to household ratio is holding steady. I think most recently at about 1.4, maybe 1.7. But I will just read from our own housing element that we recently adopted that since 2010, the number of jobs located in the jurisdiction increased by 42.7%. But the number of homes in the jurisdiction increased by 3.6%. That is a jobs to housing imbalance. And when we see that kind of disparity, what we expect is that the people who have the most money are the ones who are able to access the housing. And we would expect to see an increase in home prices. And our housing element then goes on to note in the very next line that in the same period, home prices have increased by 110%. And so what's happening is that we are consistent when it comes to overcrowding, but the affordability is taking a huge hit because the people with the most money are the ones who are able to stay in the housing. So I'm just going to put that out there. I'm reading from our own housing element. And I think the way to stop that problem is to make sure that we are not building more commercial than we are building housing. And this is, I think, the best tool we have in our toolbox to do that. That said, I realize proposing a different metric is a big thing to propose at this time. I realize that there probably would need to be more analysis done about what the impacts would be. But my concern is that I don't actually think that what is proposed before us is going to solve the problem, because we know already that these numbers were resulting in huge imbalances of the number of new jobs created to the number of new homes created.
So through the chair, I completely agree with your assessment. It has been extremely frustrating throughout the last 5 or 6 years when the state density bonuses have been introduced and used not in the intent that I think the state had hoped. I do strongly believe that we have a huge housing imbalance. And it's gotten to the point where it's become infeasible for people to buy in our area. That's all there is to it. It's virtually impossible unless you're already wealthy. So, and part of that does have, part of the jobs imbalance, it leads to that. And as we continue to make that imbalance more acute, we're only going to continue to exacerbate the problem. I agree. To make that type of a change, which you were proposing, I think is a great idea for Mountain View. And I think it could possibly at one point be a great idea for San Mateo. I don't think it would work this year. I think it would take time to develop it, understand it. We are constantly told, as you know, that the developers can't do it because the commercial is supporting the residential. Have we ever been given any financial data from a developer to back that up? No. Will we ever get it? No, because they refuse to actually tell us why they make that argument. So is that argument valid? I don't know, but it's the same argument they've used forever. I like your proposal. I don't know if I would simply add that on at this point for the council to look at. Yet it makes a lot of sense. Is it feasible? I honestly don't. But I do like you thinking and comparing to Mountain View. How they got to that number in Mountain View, I would love to understand that more. I'm assuming, I don't know Mountain View that well, but I'm assuming they have been dealing with this issue as long as we have, but they may have come up with some crafty ideas to address it. We're not there. I wish we were. but I don't know what the rest of the commissioners would want to do specifically this evening to address this proposal.
Through the chair, since this isn't something that I have been able to sit and think about on my own time, I would like to just have it put forth a suggestion, because I like the idea. I think maybe going forward, we recommend to the council that we adopt this, but we look at how in our general plan we have ranges for stories for mixed use, low, medium, high. For take mixed use medium, for instance, it's 4 to 6 stories. Now, I would think this might be palatable for the council and also something they may be interested in the future if we were to say this more general density basis could be used for mixed use projects from up to 4 stories in mixed use medium, where the range is 4 to 6. If you want to go up to 6 stories, then maybe we need to include the more stringent proposal that's similar to what Mountain View is going. I don't think we have the capacity tonight to include that in, but I think that being able to provide that sort of flexibility in a way that you can kind of see the proof in the pudding of like what gets developed. We're not necessarily preventing housing if it's the subsidy that's required, but I don't think it's actually necessary at this stage. And then we can see if it is actually that developers are trying to just maximize the volume and using that maximum volume for residential as kind of a way to figure that out, feel it out in the future. So just to reiterate what I'm saying, we have ranges for our heights in our general plan for things like mixed use high. And I would say in the future, we can progress this policy to say, if you want the minimum of the range, you just use this flat density. If you want to go to the maximum of the range or anything above the minimum up to our maximum, you use the more stringent Mountain View method to maximize. I mean, that's where I would put it. But again, I don't think that we're able to approve that tonight, but I think that that's a recommendation for the council to look at in the future as we continue to work through the housing element.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, I think Commissioner Ebnetter and Commissioner Nugent both, made some comments which I would agree with in terms of, the difficulty of my ability to fully grasp this proposal this evening. I think it's very interesting. I don't know that Mountain View and San Mateo are so fundamentally different that it couldn't work here. We're pretty close to each other, and
they actually have a higher arena than we do.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, they're more incentivized to enable more housing development.
Yeah. But I think I was having difficulty, that like specific ratios and things like that. I was trying to write down as you were mentioning them. I don't even have them all down here to look at. So
yeah.
So it's a bit challenging to kind of deviate too much from.
I don't have it down.
Yeah, what's proposed here tonight, and I also agree. I think we need to have something in place. I think it'd be really great to have one of these in place before we leave this evening.
Yeah.
I think then the question is, how soon? Yeah, I think it's an interesting proposal, worth looking into. The question is, how soon could we revisit it? Because if we say, okay, this is something for council to approach in the future, when is that future? Are we talking about a year from now? Are we talking about in a few months? Are we talking about the next time we revise this stuff in 10 years? I don't understand that part right now. Like, how soon could we come back to this if we wanted to?
That's a good question.
Why don't we ask staff? What would be, I mean, do we have any precedent in this kind of suggestion where we go forward with this as proposed, and then we would recommend to council that it be relooked at, and this is outside of like a policy document specifically that, the housing element has general dates and general timelines. Like, how would we propose a relook at this in the future?
I believe in the staff report, it does mention that this is temporary, right? That the intent is to do more research and to come back
Okay.
to council with it says densities will be further studied during the comprehensive zoning update project, which I think is going to happen over the next 2 years, right?
Okay.
So what we could do is we could adopt this, but recommend that the council consider other metrics like a unit to commercial square foot ratio, or what Redwood City has done, which I believe our city manager would be very familiar with, which is to create buckets of uses. And as projects come in, the available amount in those buckets decreases. And so it, at some point, it forces only development of a certain kind of use. There's many different ways that this has been done in other jurisdictions. And so we could adopt this tonight, but say as part of the comprehensive zoning update project, we recommend that the staff and council consider ways to ensure more balanced growth.
Through the chair, just as a clarification, there is no adoption tonight. It's just.
Right.
Oh, sorry, a recommendation. Yeah.
Through the chair, I think I like this idea of if like including these other options in the study and revisiting them, and like it would be great if there was, kind of the way we could get it is like, here's A, here's B, here's C, something like that, I think I've seen some reports where it's like, here's what this other city is doing. I think what would be really great to see is like, here's what would that look like here. And so, getting presented the options where it says, like, here's the option that we have before us. That's one possibility. Here's another or, here's the ratios, or this bucket system, which you mentioned, which you touched on there, which sounds intriguing. It'd be great to, kind of see, okay, like, how could that actually work here? I'd really like to see that.
I agree with all the other commissioners that I need more time to digest this proposal from you. So I think if we were to make a recommendation for approval and include a general, in a general sense, that we would like the opportunity to study this in the future. I say general just because I haven't had time to digest the various options, so.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing is recommend adopting this, but also recommend that council investigate as part of the comprehensive zoning update, ensuring an even more balanced approach through other mechanisms or metrics.
Yeah, I think that the goal, a more balanced approach as a goal is important. And I guess there's no harm in saying the pieces that you said, the metrics or other measures or metrics. So,
Yeah.
or
And
mechanisms or measures.
I know that you asked, it's hard for me just reading these. You asked what the exact numbers are. I'm going to look to our attorney. If I write down what I proposed and send it to staff, can staff then distribute that to the commissioners so they know what I proposed for their own, I think, study later? I'm trying to avoid any Brown Act issues with me emailing a written copy of what I just said directly to the other commissioners.
Would you like to just state it again for the record and we could put it in the minutes, maybe verbatim?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just looking at these boxes, right? Start on the left within a half mile of the Caltrain stop. Mixed use low and mixed use medium 1. This is the top left box. Instead of 30 units per acre, I am proposing 1 unit per 300 square feet of commercial.
And that translates to
About a 1.5 to
1
1 employee to housing ratio. In the box immediately below that, mixed use medium 2 and mixed use high. I am proposing 1 unit per 150 square feet of commercial.
Which translates to
0.75 employees per housing unit. If we move over to the right, outside of a half mile from Caltrain stop, the top box, mixed use low. Instead of the 10 units per acre, I am proposing 1 unit per 800 square feet of commercial. Which is about 4 employees per housing unit. I'm watching Commissioner Williams' pen. For mixed use medium 1, the next box down, instead of 15 units per acre, I am proposing 1 unit per 500 square feet of commercial. Which is about 2.5 employees per housing unit. For mixed use medium 2, instead of 30 units per acre, I am proposing 1 unit per 300 square feet of commercial. So that's the same 1.5 to 1 ratio. And then for mixed use high, instead of the 50 units per acre, again proposing 1 unit per 150 square feet of commercial, which is 0.75 employees per housing unit. And so the overall intent is that as we go higher, we are building more residential than we are commercial, which I believe is responding to feedback that we're hearing from the community about why are we building 10-story office buildings when what we need is housing. So if that made it into the minutes and was suggested as something for council to consider as we do the comprehensive zoning update, I think that would be a great
I
outcome.
think it's a great proposal. Thank you for your time. Great work.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I definitely would be interested in seeing that, like a proposal included, in the comprehensive update as something to actively consider and recommend,
So as a point of clarification,
potentially recommend.
is your metric with the boxes part of what you would like the city council to consider? Or
I
for
think that-
future study?
For future study.
Future, yeah.
So what I'm saying is we recommend that they adopt what staff is recommending here, but that they consider that metric for the future studies as part of the comprehensive zoning update.
Okay, thank you.
Because I assume that there would need time to study what that means and what the potential impacts could be. And because I am a wonk, I actually have one more suggestion, which was, do we give applicants the flexibility to achieve these minimum densities across multiple projects? I'm basically piggybacking off of what we are suggesting for the proposed BMR changes and allowing off-site construction to achieve these minimum densities.
I wasn't particularly in favor of that
Okay.
anyway. So
I think that's totally fair. It's totally fine to say no.
My gut says no.
Okay,
Well,
fair enough.
is it mixed use at that point?
It's not
Right.
mixed use, but I was in the same mindset of the overall goals here, which is like how to increase flexibility, how to ensure that the housing even gets built, that it just doesn't happen because it's too hard.
Well,
That's where my mind was.
well,
I don't think taking it to a separate site makes it any more likely to get built. I just don't see that. I mean, we talked about that, but
Yeah.
so
I think it comes back to that issue where, it's like, oh, we'll build the office first, and then we'll build the 60 units or whatever, whatever is of housing next. And then doesn't happen.
Yeah,
here.
Well,
I see
the
too many
provisions in the
pitfalls.
BMR option require concurrent development, right?
Yeah.
And so you would do the exact same thing. You wouldn't allow that.
But there's too many pitfalls to that, in my mind.
I think it's fair. It's totally fair to say no, that's too complicated.
Through the chair, also in mixed use zoning, you can still have purely office development. You can have purely residential.
Totally.
And this is more focused, I would say, on using density bonus law.
Because why
Yeah.
why wouldn't you just then only do a commercial building, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Do we have any other comments? Okay, I think what I heard is consensus on recommending the staff suggestions with the added caveat of recommending that council consider this other metric, units to square footage, as part of the comprehensive zoning update.
Through
Should
the
we-
chair, and I would add I would also phrase it as saying, and as partially as a potential response to community concerns about the overproduction of
Yes.
commercial.
Yep. Can we get the resolution text on the screen, or the the motion text? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion based on the staff recommendations that are posted.
With the inclusion?
With the inclusion of the recommendation for that you had for the future study of the ratio method for the comprehensive zoning code update.
I'll second that.
And for the vote, Chair Patel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Ebneter,
Yes.
Commissioner Klafter,
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
All right, we will close that item. Next, we have reports and announcements. I actually have a few things that I wanted to bring up because it's been a while since we've met, but perhaps we should go to staff first for any reports or announcements.
Good evening, Zach Dahl, Community Development Director. My apologies for not being there in person, but I'm under the weather, so I didn't want to share what I had with anyone else. Do want to note, looking ahead, we do anticipate canceling our second meeting in May for lack of any agenda items, and we are still looking at our June meetings. We know we've got a lot of projects on the longer term horizon, but we have a smaller workload for the Planning Commission near term. So there's potential that we will be canceling our first meeting in June as well, but we're still assessing where everything is at, and then probably holding our second meeting in June. So if you do have conflicts or will be unable to attend your June meetings, either of the June meeting dates, please reach out to staff. Also wanted to acknowledge that tonight is Administrative Assistant Ashley Snodgrass's last night with the Community Development Department and supporting the Planning Commission. She has been promoted to a role with the Parks and Rec Department. And so want to acknowledge her presence over the years in supporting the Planning Commission, staying ahead of the various tech gremlins and everything else that's gone on in chambers. I know it's a lot to keep everything up and running and keep everything streaming. So wanted to acknowledge her and thank her for her work over these past 3 years and wish her all the best moving forward with our Parks and Rec Department here in San Mateo. Also, since we won't be having a second meeting in May, this will be the last meetings for Commissioner Ebneter and Commissioner Nugent. So wanted to also acknowledge that and provide an opportunity for any of the other commissioners to weigh in or share their thoughts, but wanted to recognize their contributions. Commissioner Ebneter for 2 terms and also for Commissioner Nugent for this past term. A lot of work has gone in, a lot of consequential projects, and so have appreciated working with you, hearing your input, and guiding many important projects and policy efforts through the process and getting them ultimately adopted, implemented, and constructed. So I'll end it at that, but wanted to recognize those and wish I could be there in person for tonight's meeting.
I have some comments planned. I think before we start heaping accolades on all of these people, there are a few things that I wanted to bring up during notes and announcements and let's get the dry stuff out of the way. One, I wanted to acknowledge that 4 of us went to the Planning Commissioners Academy in March. And it was a really great experience. I participated in a panel, the Planning Commissioners 101 panel. That was a really great opportunity that PlaceWorks invited me to do, and I really enjoyed doing that. I did want to call out, and just for the record, make staff aware of, oh, am I not allowed to do this? Oh, okay.
Sorry. When you're done with your comments, could we send it back to the director? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to relay some feedback of my experience at the Planning Commissioners Academy for the past 2 times I've gone, putting this out there for staff to do what you will with it. So the Planning Commissioners Academy is hosted by the League of California Cities, which is a organization whose goal is to defend and expand local control per their website. And so they do a lot of lobbying to the state legislature. They also host workshops. They also host things like the Planning Commissioners Academy. They also do trainings. Cities, jurisdictions pay to be a member. I believe that based on our population, we are likely paying $32,000 a year about to be a member. The last item on the agenda, the 2 years I've went, is a legislative roundup where a representative of the League of California Cities goes through potentially interesting bills that are before the legislature that session and provides an overview of those bills, and then typically provides information about whether the league is recommending that those bills be where the league is recommending a support position for those bills or an opposed position for those bills or a no position for those bills. I will say it feels, in my 2 times at the Planning Commissioners Academy, they have always recommended an opposed position or a no position on any housing related bills. They're well known for being opposed to housing legislation. And it feels a little awkward to be attending an event in an official capacity when the organizers of the event and when the information of the event is expressing a bias towards one side or another on these issues. I know there's a lot of concerns about potentially attending events that have biases. And I realize that this one might be a little bit different because we're a member of the League of California Cities, but I just want to put it out there. It feels very awkward in that session. It particularly feels awkward because the language used in that session is not professional. This year, the person leading the session made a lot of disparaging comments about state legislatures, including our own State Senator Josh Becker. And the ones about Senator Becker were not as bad as the ones about others. But it felt really weird to be attending an event in a professional capacity where someone was expressing really strongly disparaging comments about state legislators. So I will put that out there as some feedback. There were 3 other people who were there. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that, but I think it's just something to consider moving forward as we are attending that event in an official capacity. All right, we'll leave it there. I think also one thing I wanted to bring up to staff is that I believe it would be beneficial, especially as we are welcoming 2 new commissioners into this dais, if we could get some more clarification on what types of participation in advocacy is permitted. I think we do a really good job as a city of conducting trainings about laws. Like we get the Brown Act training, there's a state ethics training. We also have a city training, a chair and vice chair training, which is really helpful. But we don't really provide a lot of guidance around norms. And I would say in my experience, it is really natural as a new commissioner when you're joining to look at established commissioners and to look at council members as like an example of how to conduct yourselves in a meeting, of what types of events it's appropriate to attend, how to navigate the balance between supporting causes you believe in while maintaining due process rights. And I know that there was some discussion about adopting new ethics rules at a special city council meeting over the weekend. There was a quote in the San Mateo Daily Journal today about commissioners needing to set aside their own political goals and stances in order to evaluate policies, memos, and practices. And as I am consuming this information, I am left confused about what exactly those things mean. Does that mean that it's not acceptable for commissioners to attend events or to accept speaking engagements because that could be construed as furthering a political goal or stance? Does that mean it's not okay to walk a picket line? Those are all things that our council members do. And I think I'm a little bit confused about like what behavior is acceptable for a council member versus what behavior is acceptable for a commissioner. And it would be really great to have that kind of guidance clearly laid out in writing, especially if the rules and norms for commissioners are more restrictive than they are for council members. And I just want to make sure that we are setting up our new commissioners for success. I know one of them is very active in local politics and one of them is very active in their union. And so I think it would be great if we could have some guidance, not just for them, but for us too, about what is permissible when it comes to advocacy.
May I just, for the public, clarify that there are not officially appointed new planning commission members?
Sorry.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
There have been recommendations made for 2 new commissioners that I believe goes to the council at their next meeting to formally be appointed. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, if it's, I know we can't discuss it, but if we could put a request out there for some guidance, I think that would be helpful.
Staff has noted that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then I think we wanted to turn it back to Director Dahl.
Thank you for letting me interrupt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry. I think Commissioner Williams wanted to say something.
I don't know what's the appropriate time to add this in about the Planning Commission Academy. I just wanted, if this is okay, this is not related to what you were saying, but there were questions and comments from people, commissioners from other cities about that don't have approved housing elements and about the number of builder's remedy projects that they are facing or not facing that are taking place. So I just wanted to say kudos to City of San Mateo, including us, I guess that includes us, for having completed our housing element on time and successfully. And I was kind of shocked by that to know how many, cities there are out there that haven't gotten the process completed. And it's a difficult process, but yeah. So anyway, kudos to City of San Mateo folks. Thank you.
Sorry, one other announcement I wanted to eject and got lost in the shuffle was that I want to introduce CDD's new Deputy Director, Sun Kwan. It feels like he's been with us a long time now. He started beginning of April, but we haven't had a Planning Commission meeting since then. He will be stepping in to support Planning Commission as staff liaison until we have a new planning manager appointed to fill that role. And so this is Sun's first meeting. So I do want to introduce him to the commission and welcome aboard. It's been great. And yeah, it feels like he's already jumped in a month and a half later. He doesn't feel new at all. But for the commission, this is the first meeting tonight. So I want to welcome Sun to the team and in his role to support the Planning Commission moving forward.
Welcome.
Great, thank you. Happy to be here.
And that's everything that I have. I'll turn it over to the commission or any other announcements or comments.
All right. I think we have some last meetings for some folks. I want to start by thanking Ashley for all of your work with the Planning Commission. You have been a total lifesaver in so many situations. I don't know how many times I've been like, Ashley, a meeting is about to start and my Zoom's not working, or my password's been locked out. Like, what do I do? You're so good at problem solving under pressure and doing it while being completely calm. So I just want to congratulate you on your promotion and say that Parks and Rec is so lucky to have you, and just wish you well. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to say anything.
Through the chair. Yes, I do. It's been a pleasure working with you. You've been very professional, and we've had lots of interesting things that have happened over the course of your tenure with us, and you've handled it so well, and you're deserving of whatever you do in the future.
Yeah, the three words that came to mind, you used one of them, but calm, cool, and collected, like it's under pressure for sure. So it seems like there's complicated stuff going on sometimes over there when we're trying to just, do our part over here. You're doing a lot of stuff over there. So thank you. And hopefully I'll see you around town like I have in the past. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the relative newcomer here, and I just want to say thank you. Congratulations, of course, on the promotion, and thank you for helping make me comfortable here as I settled into this position. And I think I'm still learning things, but you've been very, very helpful, and I've appreciated seeing all of your emails over the last year or so. Just saying, here's what's going on, and here's what you need to know, and it's all been very welcome. So thank you.
Through the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, it really has been a lot of fun watching you from the first meeting to now. You've really become an extremely polished administrator. You've done a great job. Mary did a wonderful job shepherding you through quite a few issues that I think we ran into when you first started. There was a lot going on. So it's really been a pleasure to see you progress to the point where you are. And congratulations on your moving into Park and Recs. Through the chair, could I have a minute or two also?
You can, but first I want to give Ashley a little thank you
great.
on behalf of the commission. Thanks, Ross.
So through the chair, in honor of this being my last meeting, I wanted to start by thanking city staff members who have been influential in helping me navigate the ebb and flows of this position for the last 10 years. Larry Patterson, Patrice Old, Ron Municala, the fantastic community development administrative staff, too many excellent planners to name here, and past city attorney Gabrielle Wayland were all very helpful for me. And of course, I am indebted to past city council members Joe Goethals, Rick Bonilla, and David Lim, who encouraged me to apply for this position originally. I have a great appreciation for the engagement and in collaboration of the fellow planning commissioners who inspired me to truly represent the residents of San Mateo. Per the commission's handbook, we are directed to make decisions based on what is best for all the city's residents. And I have seen that guideline followed by most of the commissioners I've served with. The current set of commissioners have substantially elevated the level of dedication, expertise, and desire to help this city grow in the most sustainable and equitable manner possible. I am extremely proud of what we have accomplished together. Charlie Dressler taught me early on to pay close attention to the public comments, and that was truly a blessing. I feel that listening to the public is just as important, if not more so, than the applicants or staff reports. I've advocated for policies that are part of the city charter and goals and visions of our general plan. At times, this position was deemed to be counterproductive, yet in fact, it was done to further the shared goals of the city. As a member of this advisory board, my obligation was to relay to the city council my independent ideas on what was best for everyone in the city. Knowing that I was aligning with resident-driven goals, my decision-making process was very easy. In year 2 of my term, a city police captain told me that the department heads will routinely lie to you and then laugh in your face. I found this hard to believe. Unfortunately, I experienced exactly what he had described, and the outcomes of those digressions that will negatively impact this city for decades to come are my biggest regret in not being able to right those wrongs. The city's stated values of promoting diversity and inclusivity are trampled on by those in the public and by city leaders, elected and staff, who routinely villainize anyone with alternative views. We promote an open and affirming dialogue, yet we've done nothing to protect the voices of reason resonating for those who have been and continue to be marginalized. The politicalization of the volunteer positions by city council has the eerie familiar feeling of the distorted allegiance demanded by the current president of the United States. I have gladly given 10 years of my life to the city, and it has actually been an honor. Playing a small part in shaping policy and moving projects forward leaves me with a sense of accomplishment. I have great concerns that all the boards and commissions are rapidly losing the ability to have open and diverse viewpoints, and this will leave us with much less able to meet any of our shared goals. I leave this position fully knowing that the city can be diverse, balanced, inclusive, prosperous, and resilient, yet it will take monumental shifts in priorities to reach these shared goals. It truly has been an honor to sit here for 10 years and to see the efforts of so many people make us a better place to live. And I hope that we can continue to grow and prosper as a vibrant city as we all want. Thank you.
I don't have anything prepared, but I do want to thank my fellow commissioners for giving me a lovely time over the past 4 years. It has been truly an honor to debate and figure out policy directions and recommendations for projects. It was an amazing accomplishment to get the general plan passed and adopted. Same thing for the housing element. I think that we did a lot. It's been rather slow the past few months, but we did a lot, and I'm very proud to have done that with you. I also want to thank staff. There's been new faces. It's constantly churning, and everything that I've done with staff has been towards great goals that we've accomplished. And I hope for a brighter future for San Mateo based on what we've done and what can be done in the future as a body and as a city.
You'd like to go first? Oh, well, I just want to say, I think I'll have been on the commission for maybe just under, just about a year, here at this point. Obviously, it's been a very quiet year. So I regret that we did not have more meetings and more opportunities to converse. I think it's been wonderful to work with both of you, and I've been learning a lot. I really appreciate your expertise, your experience on the commission, all of the hard work that went into the general plan and the housing element and all these things, which your work with staff, has laid the foundation for things that I'm sure I'll be seeing in the next few years. And so I definitely have a lot to think about, moving forward, based on your examples, a lot to live up to. So thank you so much, and thank you for your service to the city. In particular, John, who's as you said, 10 years. I'm sure that as I've gone about my daily life, I've already interacted with projects which you played a role in, and didn't fully appreciate the contributions of the commission and yourself in particular. So thank you.
Thank you.
one thing that came to mind related to my sort of, Planning Commission Academy realization of how, how we do a really great job here in the city of San Mateo was there was, I think at either this Planning Commission Academy or some other planning commissioner training, there's a class for, how to get along with your fellow planning commissioners and to come to consensus or not necessarily consensus, but to work through the issues. And, I just find that to be sort of funny because we always have had such a good working relationship with you, with both of you in particular, and in general as a commission as well. But in particular, I would say, John, have always brought up, a different point of view, a compassionate point of view, really some thought-provoking questions that have just really benefited the discussion and added to the discussion of the issues that we look at here. And Adam, I learn something from you all the time, and the detail and the knowledge that you brought to projects, I just glommed onto and really, really appreciated hearing your point of view. As a group, whether we all agreed or not, we certainly don't really need training on how to get along. We all enjoy each other's company here as well. I think. I just thank you for the 10 years. I wish you were going to be here longer. But yeah, I really appreciate both of you, all the work that you've given to the city of San Mateo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few notes. I will try to do this without crying. I've had to do 3 tributes this week, so I'm a little a little emotional already. Adam, I'm going to start with you. I think your lifelong commitment to public service is really evident in the dedication and work ethic that you've brought to the Planning Commission. One of the public commenters noted, are there any 2 other commissioners who take their job so seriously? And I think the answer is no. It was always so apparent how much time you invested into thoroughly preparing for every agenda item, how you've taken it upon yourself to familiarize yourself with local regulations, with state regulations, like you've taken every state training on everything. I remember one time very early on in serving with you where we were talking about affirmatively furthering fair housing, and you casually mentioned like, oh yeah, I've read AB 686. And I was like, what? You read an entire state bill? And then I learned you read them all. And that level of research is so evident in the solutions that you brought to the dais and in the information that you shared with us, that you shared with the public, that you shared with staff. I think we were all more informed and better for it. I think as we serve together as a commission, we all bring different expertises and backgrounds to the table. And I think we all kind of got used to what to expect from each other. And I know I could always count on you for really detailed feedback on landscape and architectural details. So I know like I don't have to read every tree species on this plan because I know Adam is going to, and he's going to come to the table with like more facts than I could ever know about like salt tolerant trees or something. I think you also won the award for best examples from the local region. Like every time we were giving feedback on a study session, you would be like, you should look at this building at this address or this other building at this address. And I noticed that all of us commissioners are like frantically writing down the address and like looking them up on Street View. So I definitely ended up using that as a crutch as well. I was like, I know Adam's going to come to the table with some great examples, so I don't have to do that research. You are such a thoughtful listener, and you're so good at navigating complex issues and detailed conversations. You're really willing to ask the tough out questions and prioritize long-term outcomes with the greatest benefit to the community over short-term or popular fixes. I think I often saw you and John too routinely advocating for the right decision for San Mateo and not necessarily the easy decision. I think there's no other person who tries harder than you to find and implement the best solutions for San Mateo. As an example, I think about when we were doing the objective design standards and you took Santa Barbara's standards, which are like kind of a really good watermark and example in the state. And you created this detailed guide demonstrating how they could be adapted for San Mateo. And that effort became the impetus for our downtown plan area objective design standards. Like we weren't going to have a Spanish colonial requirement until you did that research and brought it to the table. And I think now in the future, I hope that when you walk around downtown San Mateo and you see all the new Spanish colonial developments, you feel pride in that very tangible, positive impact that you had on our city. You also served on the general plan subcommittee, not just the planning commission. And I think your guidance and your ideas and your suggestions have immeasurably benefited all of the documents and deliverables that those two organizations have produced. I also want to highlight that every single one of your fellow planning commissioners sent a letter to the city council encouraging your reappointment. I think 3 of the 4 of us have been serving with you for your entire term. And the fact that we all supported you just demonstrates that we saw serving alongside you all of the hard work, all of the dedication, all of the deep subject matter expertise, all of the research, and the immeasurable value that you brought to the Planning Commission. And I hope that you remember that we saw that. Your departure is a really keen loss for the city of San Mateo, but I fully expect you to go on to bigger and better things and have a much broader impact beyond this city. I can't wait to see what you do next. John, how do we even start to summarize 10 years of service to the city? I mean, you have served longer than many council members. You have been here longer than many residents. You've, in some cases, served longer than staff. I mean, you have this institutional memory that is incredible. I have to tell the story of how I met you. So I met John because he wrote an op-ed in the Daily Journal and I thought it was so good. And I was like, who is this guy? And I Googled you and I found your LinkedIn. It was the only thing that came up. And I sent you a message on LinkedIn and I said, Commissioner Ebnetter, I really enjoyed your op-ed. I would love to get coffee sometime and talk about land use in San Mateo. Would you be willing to chat? You never responded. You told me that later. The first time I met you was the morning after I was appointed, because I was appointed the night before a planning commission meeting where the first item I ever reviewed was a SPAR amendment for Bay Meadows, and the packet was over 1,000 pages long. And you called me the next morning and you said, hey, welcome to the Planning Commission. Would you like some help in getting up to speed for the meeting that's in 6 hours? And I said, yes. And you spent several hours with me on the phone, just helping me to even understand, like, what is the history behind this project? What is it that we're looking at today? What of the 1,000 pages in the packet should I even pay attention to in the 6 hours I had to prep? And I think that is such the epitome of who you are, that you always go out of your way to help someone, even people that you've never met or just meeting for the first time. You were one of my first mentors in public service, and you've been a huge inspiration to me. You never hesitate to do the work. You never hesitate to help on anything. You've been tireless in advocating for a more equitable and climate resilient San Mateo over the last 10 years. You've pushed the city to think about the impact of the housing crisis and how to measure it, including considering service worker jobs in the impact. You've built a relationship with One Shoreline. You've kept us honest on our efforts to affirmatively further fair housing. You have always put the needs of our disadvantaged community members at the forefront. We've previously talked about how there are beliefs and policy practices that are widely accepted today that would have been controversial to talk about 10 years ago. For example, talking about the history of redlining and encouraging the city to take active steps to mitigate the harm it caused. We all acknowledge that today, but 10 years ago, that would have been a very controversial thing to say. And you had the courage to bring this perspective to the dais when raising those topics did not make you popular. It could not have been easy to do this for a decade, to spend so many years as the one in the 4-to-1 votes. You were a vanguard that helped to usher in a more inclusive and just San Mateo, and I really hope that you were proud of the impact you had. Those of us that you've mentored, we are your legacy, and I hope that we in turn will make you proud. Thank you for your service. Any other comments?
I think we should close the meeting before I start crying.
I know, I think we should too. There may be some cake, so why don't we party? And with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much.